Welcome into another edition of the Kevin and Jason Show. I'm your host today, Kevin Misseri, here with Jason Shannon, going through this big Bills-Dolphins matchup. The winless Dolphins are coming into New Era Field here to attack the 4-1 Bills with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm, with a monumentally poor roster. But it is football. It's still the NFL. Anything can happen in these games. We're going to go through that pregame, some nose nuggets, stats, scores, PFF notes, things that we have on this matchup. Take a couple of questions. And then I think the majority of us will be at the game, so we'll be able to kind of see what we see on the field, which might be less than we would at home. But it's NFL football, and it's back. We are back from the bye after our week break. Jason, how you doing?
I've been thinking about Bills football every second since the Titans game. I'm excited to be going to this game this weekend, and I am hoping for a blowout. A lot of people don't think that blowouts are very exciting, but I really do think that we have to just throttle a team eventually. We've played against a bunch of poor teams. We've played a lot of close games. I want to see a start-to-finish dominating performance, and I want to see it in person, and I want to see it in beautiful 63-degree weather. And I'm ready for this. And there's no better team to do it against the Dolphins, and there's no better team to do it against a bad Dolphins team. And this team is bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the Dolphins are a lot of history there, going back to the 90s. It's a lot more interested than, like, say, a bad Redskins team that they'll see in a couple of weeks, whatever. I mean, it's the Dolphins. You take it when you can get it. You crush them. You put them into oblivion. You keep all their tire fire team going. Last thing you do is give them any spot. I mean, for them, keeping it single digits is a win for them. So the Bills looking bad in this game, even sneaking out a win. I've even heard people talking about, well, who really cares what the offense does if we sneak out a 14-7 win or 14-6 win? Like, that's what they need to do. And I think you're right, Jason. You need to just put your foot on their throat and just end it. They're just a squealing fish. There's nothing there talent wise. I mean, you look at their roster, they're NFL players, I guess, but I think the majority of them would be backups. There's some talent at the receiver position. There's a few players defensively that you might roster. You wouldn't roster anyone on their O-line. There's certainly, you might take Fitz or Rosen as a backup quarterback on your team. I mean, a lot of people have already with Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's some running back talent. Kellen Balaj is terrible. I wasted my time and money with him in fantasy. Kenyon Drake, I guess people like. I haven't seen it since his last two coaches decided really not to play him. And then there's obviously this Mark Walton love, San Francisco, street free agent there. Let's start there. Let's start with their offense, Jason. So I think you kind of mentioned you like a little bit at the receiving core. They have some players that against bad D-backs should win. So kind of what's your take right at the top of this Dolphins offense?
Yeah, I mean, they have good some big receivers, some athletic receivers, some guys that probably have slightly underperformed in their career, but can still put on big plays when they want to. I'm, talking about Devontae Parker in that case. I think Albert Wilson's been pretty serviceable at the slot position everywhere he's went. And then Preston Williams, who is the undrafted free agent from this year's draft that has shown a lot of potential, 17 catches, 232 yards, and a touchdown this year so far. I think he's getting to play more and more every week, and I think that he probably presents the biggest damage or the potential for damage in terms of the receiving core. Jakeem Grant's a fast player. Alan Hearns has had his one productive season and has sort of bounced around at this point. But, it's an average receiving core, probably even below average, but that still probably puts that group as one of their best groups on their team. Again, we're going to go over and over about it. Like, the team isn't very good. They're not trying to win. They're actively trying to lose. Even when they get brought back by Fitz, when they pull out Rosen, the team still figures out a way to surefire lose the game. So, anything other than a dominating performance would be pretty disappointing for us. But, the receiving core, I guess I try to think about, if we're going to get beat, how are we going to do it? And how are they going to do it? And I'm not sure there's really any other avenue other than like a really outstanding Fitz game and some big plays from these guys. But the problem for the Dolphins is that they're facing one of the best secondaries in the league, and
without an offensive line.
Right. And a terrible offensive line. I mean, really, the passing game isn't going to have much time. Their offensive line has lack of talent and is beat up. They're starting a 6th-round pick. Their best offensive lineman, Daniel Kilgore at center, is probably not going to play, right?
Right. Yep.
And so that's making a terrible offensive line even worse. So, if they do somehow get the ball to the playmakers, that would be the situation where maybe you could see a little bit of threat. And, in any game you could put down a good play or two, a big play or two, but the Bills don't give up many of them. And I just don't see consistent avenues for them to be able to do that because of that offensive line and because of the Bills secondary. Not to mention the Bills defensive line, which has still played pretty well despite not lighting the world on fire. It's pretty good. And yeah, I mean, you could see a big play or two. You could see an impressive. You could see a play from a Dolphins receiver where you say, "Hey, that guy looks pretty talented. That's a lanky guy that runs well. That's a great catch." But stringing a bunch of those plays together is just going to be like near impossible against this Bills defense for them. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you think as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's continue on their offense, and you're gonna, we'll go from the receivers now into their offensive line a little bit more. They're starting Michael Dieter. He is the last ranked guard. He has a 26.2 out of 100 in pass block. That's going to be an issue. He's going to be their starting guard with Evan Boehm moving to center. So I mean, the other starting guard could be Isaiah Prince, the 6th-round tackle. They might move into inside. There's some talks about that, or they might start their undrafted free agent Jack Calhoun, also known as Deion Calhoun, as his real name. So he's, it's either going to have an undrafted or 6th-round pick there starting at guard based on what they want to do. With Boehm moving into center for Kilgore, who is their best offensive lineman, would probably still be Spencer Longish for us. So maybe,
Sure,
so
yeah.
that's kind of where he would make our roster, I'm sure. But that's kind of the level that they're at. Yeah. I mean, their next best lineman is probably Jesse Davis, their right tackle. And then they also have Jamarcus Webb, who's really not rosterable. So Jesse Davis might have a chance to be a swing tackle in this league on another team. They're having him playing left right now with Isaiah Prince bouncing around and Jamarcus Webb in there at right tackle. So they're trying to few things out. But this offensive line, worse than the Bills' offensive line last year. Like I said, probably I would say 2 of their starters are rosterable, and maybe they have a potential guy somewhere. I don't know why he wouldn't be playing, but not knowing too much about their backups, like Calhoun is a guy they kind of like, but you're talking about 2 rosterable offensive linemen, maybe a third as a depth guy, like an Ike Butker guy. I mean, it's not good. I've always liked Kilgore, but he's not playing.
Yeah, I mean, Dieter probably isn't playable right now, but he was their 3rd-round pick this year. They just got to play him at this point and hope that he gets better. I thought that maybe he could have even been a higher pick than that, but he went in the 3rd round this year. Prince is a 6th-rounder this year, and those guys really got shot into it immediately because this line is so bad. Sometimes you wonder why they would, even though they're bad in a bunch of places on defense too, why they went with Christian Wilkins instead of any spot on this offensive line in an offensive line draft that was pretty good as it was last year too. And I don't know, maybe getting rid of Tunsil, they didn't foresee that offer happening where they got the 2 first-round picks. But, even if Tunsil was there, it would just be a line with 3.5 open spots. So it's kind of shocking how little they put in the offensive line when really, even though they don't have a lot of talent anywhere, they just really don't give anybody a chance. And that includes Fitz or Rosen or, anybody who's going to be back there in quarterback, anybody who's going to play running back for them. Kalen Blash doesn't look good either way, but he doesn't have a chance. Kenny Drake,
chance.
I think people think is a pretty decent running back. He leads them in receptions. He leads them in rushing yards, but I think that you could unlock him a little bit with his talent if you just gave him anything. And just having that poor of an offensive line, unless you have Brady or Russell Wilson back there, like your season's ending right there. And we've seen it with Bill seasons before. So you just wonder how they built their team. And, it was a big reason why people didn't predict this team to be very good, and somehow they've actually gone under what what their expectations were. I mean, what did you think going into the year? What do you think this team's record was going to be?
I thought they'd be better than they were. I thought they had some talent. They've traded a couple of those players, had a few injuries. Uh, Clearly not trying to win now. I had them at about a 5-win team. I thought that was right. I thought they might split with the Jets. We split with them last year.
Yeah, I mean they have our schedule. They don't have the toughest schedule in the
No,
world. But,
I had 5 wins. It's going to be 1 or 2.
Blew it against a terrible Washington team. Yeah, I mean, I thought they were bad. I thought they were probably a 3-win team this year, and I guess I'm not shocked because it's the Dolphins, but they are considerably worse than what I had predicted. I mean,
and traded their 2 best players, Minkah Fitzpatrick. So
yeah, we hadn't even really talked about that, but yeah, they probably are their 2 best players, and I guess that's how you bottom out.
Yeah, it's definitely how you bottom out. And I mean, you look at their roster, and we'll finish their offense here right now and talk about their O-line, their receiving core, and a little bit about the running backs. I mean, Drake's probably going to get traded. I mean, apparently won't negotiate. He's going to be gone. So they're going to take a Jay Ajayi type of pick, 4th or 5th round pick there, and roll with the Mark Walton, Kellen Balaj for the rest of the year. I mean, they kind of play fullback in Chandler Cox, also known as their 4th tight end. Nothing special. Nick O'Leary, who's been cut from the Bills, he's, borderline not rosterable. Durham Smythe, technically they're blocking him back up the tight end. And really promising non-glove wearing Mike Gesicki is there. And I liked him at Penn State. I drafted him in a deep sim dynasty league. I think he looked good with Fitzpatrick, particularly because we all know the Scott Chandlers of the world, dominate with Fitz, and the Bills are just really good in pass coverage against the tight ends right now. But you shut out Delaney Walker, Tyler Eifert, Uzuma didn't do anything. Combo, the Jets, I guess, and Patriots didn't really have a tight end. But they're really playing really strong in that spot against tight ends. And Evan Ingram, I guess, would be the only one they played, right? So they played really well. He got his cheap points at the end. But Bills are really good in pass coverage. And it goes from Milano, really Lorenzo Alexander and Tremaine Edmonds. So really good in pass coverage. I don't have an issue. I mean, Mike Gesicki is probably one of their younger, talented players at the tight end spot, but it's easy when he's not as good as Evan Ingram, and there's not as many weapons. So
yeah, he's got nine catches for 102 yards this year. So he's still probably behind where they want him to be. He's a decent prospect. Always thought he ran funny, ran a little upright, but tested out well and produced pretty well at Penn State. But I don't think he's there yet where he's a guy that you worry about. I mean, being the 4th leading receiver on this team is.
We'll play this, Jason. Would you take him? Here's a good game, because we've pretty much said whether these guys are rosterable or not, and we've came down to maybe an offensive lineman or 2 or backup players, couple of receivers, and maybe Drake. When it comes to Gesicki, would you take him over Croft?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Well, I mean, I think that becomes a much easier question once I see Croft play a play and go a week without getting hurt. But I would say.
No.
I'd much rather have Croft at this point.
How about Dawson Knox?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have a tough time with any of the Bills' tight ends. I mean, I guess you'd take him over Sweeney at this point.
So the Sweeney, Kroom.
Yeah, I'd take him over Kroom.
Lee Smith brings too much blocking.
Smith has his role.
Yeah,
I'd rather probably go on Gesicki's potential, but I just don't even see the spot for him. I think he becomes another guy that's a lot like our other guys and doesn't really change the dynamic of this tight end. I don't think he becomes the tight end number 1. I think he's just another guy that you'd have to give reps to and probably, plays behind whoever the starter is in Lee Smith. So
yeah, I mean, essentially be replacing Tommy Sweeney, a guy you got in the 7th round anyway. So that's, I guess, the battle. And if you're not 100% sure where he'd fit in, I mean, that kind of tells you the the development of
I
Gesicki
don't
so
I don't
far.
know where he plays, if he plays on teams, but I mean that could be a guy that's inactive a bunch of weeks, honestly.
Yeah.
Uh,
He hasn't graded out particularly well in block. Nick O'Leary's been a really good pass blocker for them. Smythe hasn't been particularly any good anywhere. Apparently, he's an okay run blocker. Gesicki adds a little bit to receiving, but he's just not getting the ball. So you wouldn't really know what his receiving ability is there. You mentioned, kind of finishing them up. Preston Williams, probably their better ranked players. Parker still struggles analytically with some advanced stats. Jakeem Grant missed some games, and I guess just last week really, but hasn't been great. Alan Hearns, I don't know what happened. Alan Hearns seemed to have a promising career, bounced around, hasn't been great. And they're really running with their Albert Wilson, who is good when he plays, which has only been twice this year, and then like 6 games last year since the contract. So really, really injured player that does have talent since coming over from KC. So that's it. That's their offense, Jason. I guess lastly on their offense, going from Fitzpatrick, going to Fitzpatrick from Rosen, you're not missing much. You're gaining, Fitzpatrick technically better at this point, but, would you have just, I don't know the benefit of telling the Bills you're going to play Fitzpatrick. I think the best thing to do would be make them play both. And I mean, the Redskins had that game in hand mightily. They were much better throughout most of the game. And then all of a sudden, peppery, fiery superhero Fitzpatrick comes off the bench. You weren't really preparing. You're preparing more for a statue quarterback. They can't really can't get out of the pocket. Does have arm talent, obviously, but, outside of that, he's not much more than Mike Glennon to me at this point, and maybe ever. So really a statue type figure. Fitz has a lot of good mobility, a lot of good fire to him. He's going to play with a lot of emotion. Rosen's very calm, cool, and collected. Completely different players to me. I mean, I just think the game is just not. I think the game's over if Rosen plays, Jason. So maybe that means it's a good move to Fitzpatrick. Give them if they care about winning, to give them a 1 or 2% chance to win, because that's what Fitz does. Because he never really. I mean, he has 400-yard passing days. Will it be against this Bills defense? No, but he can do it. So I just personally, if you cared about winning, there is zero as an 0-5 team reason to tell us who you're going to start. Where do you see this? They said Rosen. All of a sudden on a Wednesday, out of nowhere, it's Fitzpatrick. What's your kind of final take on that?
The whole thing is weird to me. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't play Rosen here. At this point,
Right.
you have a lost season. Even if he's the worst quarterback today, you are trying to get that draft pick, and you're completely justified. You spent a 2nd-round pick on him. He was a 1st-round pick last year, a high pick. Has talent. You see it in throws. He had a game 2 weeks ago where between his interceptions, I mean, he was throwing darts to receivers that were just dropping the ball wide open. He looks good he looks great every 4 or 5 plays, where you're like, oh, okay, that was the guy people saw, and he's inconsistent. He hasn't had time. He basically went from the worst offensive line in the league last year to the worst offensive line in the league this year, with probably among the least offensive talent, even though I'd say last year's Bills receivers would probably argue with Arizona's. But I just think that, there's no reason not to put him out there. The only thing that I can think of really at this point, and you are right about there's no real reason to announce it, even though I don't think the Bills care too much about who plays. I think they think that they should dominate this game. But
Right.
I think that Brian Flores might be thinking, like, everybody does understand that this is a tank. Everybody knew we were going to be bad. We're clearly going to be bad, but, like, I'll probably get fired if I go in 16. Like, I probably need to win 2 games to keep my job.
Yeah, maybe
Like,
Arizona
I'm
didn't
sure
have a
they've given them
chance.
full assurances and whatever. It's hard to keep an 0-16 coach or a 1-15 coach. I think he's still at the point of the season, and maybe he sees something in this Bills team. The fact that they really haven't been dominating people, putting up points. The fact that Elam is, really almost cost his team in 2 of the games on just playing out on turnovers, that maybe this is a game they can sneak in. I tend to think that they're not going to move the ball on the Bills defense at all, and that the home crowd's going to be very overwhelming at this point. But he might be thinking that he can sneak this one in, get some Fitz magic. He's looked better in practice, all of that. I just don't think it makes any sense at this point. But yeah, I mean, going off of which one would I rather see, I probably would have rather seen Rosen. I think he's guaranteed to turn the ball over a couple times. They make a couple boneheaded plays. I mean, he's thrown 39 more passes than Fitzpatrick this year and has 5 interceptions. Fitzpatrick has 4 interceptions. So they're turning the ball over no matter what. But Rosen in 109 attempts has gotten sacked 16 times. We would have it would have been a fun game
Do
to
either of them
just get
fumble?
after him.
Has either of them had fumbles?
I wish it would be in the same line as the quarterback stats.
As it should be, right? What's
Yeah.
Fitzpatrick? Does Fitzpatrick sacks up there?
Fitzpatrick's been sacked 6 times and 70 dropbacks compared to Rosen's 16 and 109. Both of them have been getting sacked. They've thrown 9 total interceptions to 3 touchdowns. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. I know that Fitzmagic sometimes pops up here and there. He is 3-2 against the Bills in wildly different circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, we've also seen him blow the late season Jets game.
Yep.
I think I was in St. Croix. That's 2015. So I guess that's a while ago. And I was just like, oh, here's fourth quarter Fitz coming, and he threw like 2 or 3 interceptions in that quarter, and it was, it's really fun to watch him blow a game on the other team. I mean, I love Fitz, but when he's playing against the Bills, I want to see those absolutely ridiculous decisions that he still makes as a 36-year-old or whatever he is. But the thing is, even though they are different types of quarterbacks in terms of mobility, in terms of arm strength and talent, wedding rings, all of that, they are both prone to making throws like that. And I do think that even though, you know, people talk about the score not mattering that much, I think this could be a really big pickup to, you know, for units like the secondary, which has played great but hasn't had that many interceptions. If they have a 4 interception day, you know, that instills a lot of confidence in a team. You know, or a big play. We really haven't thrown the ball deep on big plays. We might be able to do that this week. If Robert Foster goes out there and scores a 75-yard touchdown, I think that's a really big momentum booster for them, no matter who they're playing against. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. I want to see some of the slower units really turn themselves around. And I think between the talent of the Dolphins and the way that they're prone to mistakes, especially at the quarterback position, I think we can turn some things into real positives. And, you know, despite absolutely have to win this game, you know, we absolutely should win this game. There's no excuse. I think we can still come out of it feeling pretty decent that we did the right things. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. You know, Fitz doesn't run like he used to. Does only have like, I think 17 yards rushing this year. So, you know,
19. You shorted him too.
Yeah, I didn't mean to short him a couple of yards rushing there. So he's really had 2 attempts against Washington for 5 yards, 1 attempt in New England, 1 attempt in Baltimore. I think the final point on kind of the Dolphins offense and Fitzpatrick is, if they go to Fitzpatrick in a hostile environment and he's bad, they can stay with Rosen for the rest of the year. I mean, they can say, we went to Buffalo, that team was pretty good defensively at least.
I just don't even see why.
On the road, you know, you guys said that he's better. That's what they want. I mean, Flores wants to say you guys said he was better. You
is
said
that what their fan sentiment is? That they want Fitz to play?
I can't speak for their fans. Are weird. They don't exist.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for their fans.
But I can speak for their media, because I followed some of them and some of their takes. And yes, that is the media take. So that, say, our medium room of Sale and Matt Perino and whatever, that's their take, is that Fitzpatrick should be playing. So I think Flores can come back and say, well, did you see that? And like, he started the whole game. The Bills had the game plan against Fitz. He didn't do anything. Why wouldn't we play Rosen to develop him to see what we have for the rest of the year? So I think there's got to be a little bit of that. I don't know how much. Maybe it's a lot. Maybe it's nothing. I think there's a little bit of, okay, we started him. He's not better, or at least equal. Here you guys go. You know, the veteran going into a good defensive team and didn't win. I mean, or wasn't good. So I think that's kind of, they can say that. If he goes and wins, then they might roll with him. I don't know. But I think that's a little bit of it, is that I said that Rosen was starting. All of a sudden I take heat from ownership or somewhere that made you change your mind in a couple of days. And Wednesday Fitz is starting, so that, you know, when I see this media team again, or people in general, I can say, is Ryan Fitzpatrick good? He just came in off the bench, and the bad Redskins had a game plan for Rosen. So we'll see what ends up transpiring there. I don't think he gets more than a game, Jason. He'd have to beat the Bills in Buffalo to continue playing for the Miami Dolphins. That's my opinion, unless a Rosen injury happens. That's my opinion. Or I guess look really, really good in a loss. I mean, I guess that's possible. I tend to think not. So, that's kind of where I stand on the Dolphins offense. It's not good. If they scored more than the Patriots 9 points, I'm going to be shocked. In similar circumstances in Buffalo, if they score more than 10 points, Jason, that's unless it's a blowout and we're just playing prevent up 30, sure, whatever. But if they score more than 10 points in a semi-ish, kind of close-ish, like Giants game that they played earlier, I cannot see them scoring more than 10. So, I mean, that's about it on their front. I mean, everybody knows about the Bills defense. Real quickly, we'll get into the injury report now before we kind of switch to the Dolphins D, which isn't much to say about them either, but we'll get in a little bit. So limited today were John Brown, Matt Milano, and Corey Thompson. Didn't practice with Frank Gore, but that's just a normal rest day. They said he practiced in full yesterday. I think everyone's going to play. I think the only, whether they're going to do this holdout Milano thing, I think it's the NFL, and if someone can play, you play them. Getting that 5th win is huge. I don't care if it's the Dolphins, Patriots, Eagles, whatever. I don't think you can say we're resting him for the Eagles game. So if he can go, he should go. Middle of the game, if you're up big, put in Lorenzo, put in Corey Thompson, put in whoever. I think you can do that 100%, but you can't do that unless you know you're winning. You need to play your best players. I mean, especially until you get that lead, if you get that lead. So that's always been my take. That'll always stay my take, and I'll never get mad at a coach for playing his best players. A lot of people were like, because last time I was pretty upset that they sat out Taron Johnson and Devin Singletary and what could have been. I mean, the Titans now look like a train wreck after playing the Bills, but what could have been an easily a wild card. They're always 8-8, 9-7. Could have been a wild card, and you kind of sat a couple of key role players. And a lot of people said they would have played if it wasn't for this rain or whatever the excuses were. I am so pro play your best players. I don't think you weigh if they can. I think if they can play, they should play. And I will never fault a coach for playing a player that checked out and cleared, and then gets re-injured. Because my opinion is he's going to get re-injured again anyways. So whether it's week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, you just sat him and then didn't know he got hurt. So that's where I stand. So that's their injury report. And real quickly on the Dolphins, they're, like we mentioned earlier, they're missing Kilgore. Didn't practice today or yesterday. So that's big news. If they were good, it would be, I guess. Rashad Jones would be big news if they were good.
Get them bad.
So once again, that'd be actually pretty big news. If I heard that in a normal like Dolphins average year, I'd be happy about that. He is probably their best defensive player right now. Now that there's no Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Avery Moss didn't practice, and they have a slew of limited guys that just, Jesse Davis, Jakeem Grant, who didn't play last week, Trent Harris, Xavier Howard, still limited. So we'll see if he suits up. Chris Lemons, Bobby McCain, Mark Walton, their promising running back, and Albert Wilson. So I'm sure some of those will pop up as out, or maybe they'll all play, but that's their list, Jason. So we're going to get to defense now, and we're going to talk about them defensively to the Bills offense, which I guess is more interesting than our previous discussion. But John Jenkins, their defensive end, probably, and Christian Wilkins, probably their better players. Devon Godshaw, their defensive line isn't egregious. It's not great. Isn't as bad as their O-line, or these are NFL players at least. Avery Moss been a good backup. They have Taco Charlton too. Not a terrible, not one particularly good, but not a terrible unit.
Not terrible, might be good enough to be the best. I mean,
might be their best all-around unit, honestly. Their secondary was pretty good before it got, no Jones, no Minkah. So I'm going to give the best unit they have to they play an interesting front too. So I'm going to give it to their defensive line, I guess. Linebacking core is not very good. They have one good player in Raekwon McMillan, who actually is top 5 in PFF linebacking rankings. Jerome Baker, Trent Harris, Vince Beagle, Deion Lacey they have here. And then they have a Sam Eganavoyan. So that's their linebacking core, one good player and nothing. In Charles Harris, I guess, their first round pick from 17 kind of splits between more of a defensive end, but they stand him up some kind of like Lorenzo.
He's not really doing much for them. Jerome Baker leads them in tackles. I know he hasn't played that great. That's a misleading stat, but I just want to point out that him and McMillan aren't the worst, but I mean, they have between Charlton and Charles Harris, they have some former first round picks that have not pass rushed the way that they were expected to. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. Vince Beagle in limited action has been okay there too. They've played actually the most snaps is Jerome Baker, 328 snaps. Has been really bad actually. 76th ranked linebacker. Struggles pretty much in every. He's okay, has a little bit of pass rush in him, but he struggled in coverage, struggled in run D. Sam Agadogovin plays actually more than Raekwon McMillan. Isn't very good either. And then obviously Raekwon McMillan is the 4th ranked, really, really good run defender. Might be the only. So he does that really well. The rest he's average at. So that's he's going to do his Titans-ish thing like Rayshawn Evans does. I mean, that's, I think, his best comparison. So good for him. That's probably, in this specific game that's playing, he's probably their best player defensively. So defensive interior, John Jenkins has been good. Like I said, he's been solid. Christian Wilkins has been a rookie. He's flashed a little bit. But like you said, there's not much pressure, right? I mean, there's no one getting after it. Charles Harris has struggled. Avery Moss has been okay in run D, but not really a pass rusher. Taco Charlton is a bust.
He's actually Taco Charlton's actually leading them in sacks this year, despite with his two.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, despite being signed into the season and getting cut by the team that drafted him as a first-round pick, he is leading them in sacks.
Okay, good for him. Ledbetter was actually in limited action, was playing really well. He's now hurt, I think, on IR. And then Vince Beagle kind of plays that linebacker defensive end spot too, kind of like they do with Charles Harris. So he's been okay in limited action. That's their defense, which is, I guess, played Washington okay, but really poor. I mean, they're starting Eric Rowe, failed from a couple of teams. He's got their most snaps, hasn't been good. They, will play Xavier Howard, who's for some reason playing awful football and easily their best player. He's looking for his way out since Minka left. It's clear. There's not much else there. I mean, they're waiting on Tinkersley to come back. He's on the PUP. I don't think he has a chance to play. He's still on the PUP. Might see him later in the year. They reclaimed Ryan Lewis, not able to make the Bills. And then they have a Jamal Wiltz is another guy that does get snaps now because they do have some backup long-term injuries at that cornerback spot. One's being Tinkersley, who will be back, but some of their depth players, aren't currently playing there. So, Jason, that's their defense. Rashad Jones is not playing, so they're out. Their safety, they're going to play a combination of Bobby McCain, who I feel like has been there forever, Stephen Parker, and Walt Aikens. So Parker's played okay. McCain's always been in below average but startable player. That's the D. What do you think of it? What's kind of your final opinions on that?
I'd love to get the passing game going and get some big plays. We just haven't had it so far, and I do like that they've had stretches of the season where they've had rhythm passing, like the start of the Jets game, even though that ended up ending at interceptions. Obviously, you don't want to throw those. You don't want to have big mistakes, but we really haven't completed anything deep downfield. I can't think of that many. I mean, the John Brown touchdown in week 1 is, one of the few plays, and it wasn't that far downfield. I'm hoping that maybe Duke Williams can help with that. I'm hoping that Robert Foster plays and is active and can get it into a rhythm. I'd love to see get him going because I really do think he's such a good talent. And even as he was hurt and didn't catch, his 3 targets or whatever, like I think that they need to make a concerted effort to get him into the game because it's tough coming in for 8 plays and getting 1 target. It's hard to make a difference like that. It seems like Isaiah McKenzie's a good guy at doing that, but other players I think need to have a more featured role. So I think a passing game would be, and it's fun. We're going to be in the stadium. It'd be sweet to see a 60-yard touchdown. But, I think they're going to be able to do what they want to. It just, they really haven't had a problem moving the ball this year. It's just that they turn it over. And, I mean, that comes largely on Josh Allen's shoulders. And I'm hoping to limit those plays, but also, on the flip side, reward it with with bigger plays as far as that goes. And I think with a hurting secondary, considering, Minka's gone, Rashad Jones is gone, Xavier Howard was a full participant in practice all week and not listed on the injury report and then sat for the Washington game. So who knows what's going on with that. There's a lot of opportunity there to make a big play. And if we don't do it here, I don't know where we're going to do it, really.
Yeah, and you're talking about a corner. If Howard doesn't go again, he's been limited in these 2 days. You're talking about a cornerback spot. I don't think any of them make our team except Howard. I mean, you're talking about Eric Rowe, Jamal Wiltz, Ken Webster's plays a lot, and Chris Lamons, who played 14 snaps last week for an injured. So they kind of split his roles up. Wiltz took a lot of snaps. And they also played a lot of this. Nick Needham must be coming off the practice squad, 29 snaps there, left cornerback. Where Howard plays. Nick Needham. Of course. I don't have beat on Nick Needham, college free agent this year. Had to have been on the practice squad prior.
No Nick Needham knowledge.
Claiming Ryan Lewis doesn't bode well for Xavier Howard could be wrong. They're already rostering 7 cornerbacks, a lot of potential bad guys. So you're talking, let's say he doesn't play, you're talking about a cornerback spot of Eric Rowe, Jamal Wiltz, and Ken Webster, with a Chris Lamons and Nick Needham depth position. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but that's preseason game 4, third quarter players, maybe outside of Rowe. Like, seriously, Eric Rowe might even be there, maybe not. I don't know. He's been on enough teams. Bobby McCain's like a serviceable safety without Rashad Jones. I mean, Jason, they need to throw the ball everywhere, which way. They don't have any coverage linebackers. Tight end needs to get involved so Croft and Knox can feast. They should be able to run the ball, though probably they're better players or run stoppers. And I mean, that's the only thing I see that some of these guys can do. John Jenkins is good at it, or Raekwon McMillan's good at it.
Yeah, they have the bigger defensive line with the run stopping linebackers, but the passing should be there. I would love to be there in person to tell my children that I went to Josh Allen's first 300-yard game.
And 4 touchdowns.
I
mean, look at how good Lamar Jackson looked. I mean, he's been pretty good, but has had his lumps. But he was really good against this Dolphins team, which had Minkah Fitzpatrick was better than it is today.
Yeah, who would have thought that playing the Dolphins and the Cardinals defenses would make you look better?
Right. Yeah. Go figure. So Josh Allen has 2 chances, one being here with a pretty poor lineup. I don't know if it's tough to say at the end of the year that'll be worse. Maybe it will be. But Cordero Tangley alone is better than most players that they play here in their secondary. So we'll see how that looks at the end of the year. But, they're nothing special on special teams. No pun intended. Jason Sanders is their kicker. Always got to bring up special teams because I noticed the glaring hole in Cairo Santos there in Tennessee ended up mattering. Jason Sanders is a younger kicker. He's only 23. Coming into Buffalo, shouldn't have too many elements. Probably the right time to kick here. But Jason, fine on extra points, no issues. Good for him. That's part of the battle right now. He's kicking 62% field goals. So
yeah, and I believe he was a very low percentage college kicker
in New Mexico.
He's in second year this year, and I believe he was
drafted
somewhere around the 70% mark, I believe, at Utah. That would be knowing way too much about Jason Sanders if I was in.
He went to New Mexico.
Okay.
So
it was almost there.
He's 1 for 4 from 40 plus. Makes pretty much anything inside of 40, which is part of the battle in this day and age right now, but pretty much nothing 40 plus. I mean,
our opposing kicker luck has been unbelievable. I mean,
you get this guy twice. He is. If you want to call it this, he is good inside of 40. He hasn't missed. So that's more than some of the guys that they've played can say, but isn't gonna do too much from distance, and don't think it'll be a field goal game anyways. Like I doubt that if Jason Sanders is missing field goals, it's going to matter like it did in other games. But
I hope not.
He did hit a 54-yarder against Baltimore in a meaningless game in the week 1, but hasn't made a kick over 39 yards since. So that's
probably will continue.
That's the kicking game. If it was even worse elements, I would say that this guy shouldn't even see the field outside extra points. The 1 extra point he might kick. That's it, Jason. So that's the game preview. Had to take a quick quick time off here to mention Cover One. We have some new apparel coming out. Check out for those links. Cover One has a lot of good stuff, a lot of good sponsorships with a couple good companies, a couple of vodka company I saw. Lots of cool stuff. Try and download the app, Slack group, premium content, the whole 9 yards. You guys know the deal. You guys are solid listeners. Get out and do that. Review us on YouTube, review us on iTunes. It's appreciated. And maybe down the road, you'll see one of us in our cool merch that Eric has made from Cover One.
We have a shirt.
We have a cool shirt, like it in gray. Probably pick one of those up. So, that'll be out there. So yeah, make sure you really, give support to Cover One and those guys and all the different shows that we have on the network. But speaking of which, I wanted to take some questions from our listeners, Jason. Want to at least entertain. We do have, I guess we'll start it off with a comment. I did want to, anyone that took a minute to respond to us. HP Sauced says, don't take them for granted and take care of business. Agreed.
I agree.
Yeah, and there's no better way to put it than
down
that.
Our throats.
Very simple, very easy, but I did have a guy named Brandon Lemire had a couple of questions, Jason. How involved do you think Devin Singletary will be? Similarly, how do you think he's utilized prior to his injury, or will they give him a few more reps to get him up to speed before we have a few more difficult matchups in the weeks ahead? What's your take? How are they going to use Singletary, and is it going to be more than they did in the first 2 weeks?
No, I think that it'll probably be similar to the usage he had in the first 2 weeks. I think that'll probably change and he'll be ramped up later in the season. I do think they look at the schedule, and even though it is, I think, the 6th easiest going forward still, even in the remaining games after we've had a pretty easy schedule here, I think they do see games like that Thanksgiving game in Dallas or even the playoff run later if we.
Isn't it the easiest, Jason, or did something change? I thought it was one.
Still
before this Miami game.
Really?
Yeah. Going into the bye, so maybe something could have changed.
Yeah. I could just be wrong too.
Yeah.
It's an easy schedule, but I think there's still 3 or 4 games that we're still going to have to put the big boy pants on, and then we're talking about the playoffs. And
even the Eagles and the Cowboys are now 500.
Yeah, I think those are better. I think the Eagles are a better team than the record. I think Dallas will still be tough on Thanksgiving.
Yep. The Eagles at home game. That's a good football game. That's a solid football game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Browns have underperformed. They're probably going to give us a game. But we have to be ready for those games and hopefully the playoffs. And I think right now the schedule is to ramp him up to the point where he's the lead back. But right now, in a situation where he's getting those 10+ yard runs and he's looked really good in the receiving game, I think he can totally be effective as a change of pace to Frank Gore, who sometimes lulls you to sleep, maybe not on the field because, he's still punishing defenses. But I think when you bring in Singletary and you get him 6 to 8 touches, I think he can impact the game in a pretty dramatic manner. And I think that we could see another game where he has, 6 total touches for 80 yards and a touchdown or something. This is a bad Miami defense. And I really do think how he acts as a change of pace, just in terms of his shiftiness and sort of where he touches the ball in the field, can make a difference in this game. We're going to get the opportunity to see him get lead back touches, I think, because I think they're going to want to see what they have in him going into next year and going forward. But I think for now, he is good in this role. And every time that he gets on the field and he touches the ball or he has to make a block, he is fresh and doesn't have to think about too much. And I think we've been able to afford to do that, and he's going to be able to do that going forward. So I like that role for him, and I think it's going to continue to increase, but I don't think the first game back from injury that's going to happen. Right.
And then similarly, Brandon wanted to know, has TJ Yeldon done enough on passing downs to remain the principal ball carrier in third downs? I think you can see a lot of TJ Yeldon, depending on the score, obviously, of TJ Yeldon in this game. They were not going to overuse Singletary unless they have to, and Frank Gore is just ageless, so maybe they'll run him. And I could see a lot of TJ Yeldon in this football game. You might even see some Snorris Perry running the ball if it gets to that point, Jason. That's the downfalls of a big, potentially a big lead. What's your take?
So TJ Yeldon, what was the end of the question?
Has he
How
done
has he
enough to
done?
be a third down, the main third down back?
No, I think Devin Singletary is going to be, but
Okay.
I think that Yeldon can be effective in the role. I'm not in love with him going forward, but I think he's good enough.
Okay.
I think he's your average running back. You'd rather have him there than Sonoris Perry, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. This might be the last game you see him unless another injury happens. This might be the last game you see him for a while. Duke Williams, has he earned enough opportunities? Yeah. I mean, with Zay Jones gone, two people asked this question different ways. Brandon again, and then Breaking Tables. Yeah, he's done enough to earn. I mean, he's wide receiver, call him wide receiver 3, but he's really going to be, an outside receiver 2, behind John Brown and Cole Beasley.
Yeah.
Does something that neither of those two do. It brings a different element. Showed that he made his red zone touchdown last week. That Zay Jones couldn't make. And then, Robert Foster adds another, and Isaiah McKenzie adds another. They're all kind of a little bit different. Foster and McKenzie the most similar, but still different. So I think he's going to see 70 snaps again, and even in a blowout, he's going to play a lot. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, he's the outside receiver going forward. I think Beasley probably still gets more snaps than him.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see them mix Foster in and then McKenzie in for his couple plays where he gets 30 yards on a reverse. But in general, yeah, I mean, he's earned it. I kind of like this receiving core at this point. And I don't know. I'm excited. Again, he brings something different. And it's going to even improve a unit that is first in red zone touchdown percentage right now.
Yep.
They're first in the league, and that's even including a kneel down at the end of the last game on the 19-yard line that counted as a miss. They're still first in the league and getting touchdowns, I believe, at 71% inside the red zone. So you add an actual true red zone.
Yep. And then lastly, we have a question, the final question of the day. And before we wrap this thing up is this week we try to get our deep aerial passing attack going. Could Foster be in the cards?
For Zay Jones, but I think the team's better.
Yeah, no, definitely. Is this the week that Foster is in the cards? Are you going to see a lot of Foster, McKenzie, and Duke Williams as if the game is kind of iffy or out of hand or whatever you want to call it? Is that kind of going to be the plan? A lot of more Foster?
Well, with John Brown nursing a little bit of an injury too, I think that this is a situation where you could really get him. You could get Foster and Williams in on the field on the outsides and just see what you got. Have a guy that burns, a guy that can go up and get catches. Would be really dynamic, And I'd love to just see Foster just get a couple even easy catches, even if you got to screen them or you got to do something. I'd just like to see him have some catches and really get in the game. And I think this could be a game where we're up, or maybe we're not even that far up yet, but get him on the field. So if you're going to do it against anybody, we might as well ramp people up against Miami. That's the way I feel about it.
And there is room for, I still think that, I don't know how it would play out, but I do think there is room for a potential receiver acquisition. So we'll see what plays out in the next couple of weeks. Definitely going to have some shows, maybe a week, maybe potential. Brandon Beane has shown the ability to make a move. Is one of the hottest trading GMs out there. So especially going 5-1, they were, I remember when they traded for Benji 4-2, 4-3 at the time. They felt the need to go for it. I think the same thing's here. 5-1 with a weak schedule. Everything's there for them to really be a competitive playoff team. So we'll see if the receiver position, the running back position, defensive pass rushers would be the one spot too. So we'll see. We'll see what happens if any of those pop up, or just a talented player that comes on the market in general. Offensive lineman, whatever.
I would say, I think they do have a long view of these kind of things. And I think a sleeper position would be a defensive end, because if you look at it right now, I'm looking ahead to the draft a little bit at this point, and it's just not a very good pass rusher draft. We're not going to be in position for Chase Young, and then you're looking probably halfway to late in the first round before I think there's a guy that's worth it. Where in comparison, probably one of the best receiver drafts I've ever seen to this point. And we have potentially multiple defensive ends leaving this team, or that we're going to have to resign, or that would be advantageous to cut. So I do think that's a position that would be considered. It's a good running back draft next year too. I really hope that we don't trade for Melvin Gordon, honestly. More just for what you'd have to pay a running back who I don't think is an upper echelon running back. Because I don't think his trade value is particularly high at this point. But yeah, I mean, those are the positions I'd be looking at.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think defense end was sneaky. I thought Von Miller made a lot of sense. I think they like the player, brings a lot to the table.
We never had a shot at him.
Denver said to be in the market. They did just win a couple of games. So if you're rooting for anything, root for Denver to lose tonight.
Do you think that there's any because Denver is probably the hottest team as far as trade stuff goes.
Not if they beat KC tonight, though.
Right. And you'll know probably by the time you hear this, by the way, Kansas City won. But Chris Harris, he has a ton of rumors right now. I think his contract's running out, but maybe a rental just as a 1 year, like really lock down that secondary and make it like almost impenetrable.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, especially on a short-term deal with, I don't know what he would require. But yeah, I mean, I think defense is sneaky. It would be, people would laugh that the move that they made would be for Von Miller or Chris Harris, but to make your best unit the best, you've seen the, similar teams like the Yankees do it with, their bullpen. They just trade for another bullpen player. It's the same type of strategy though. It's like, okay, let's just make the best, we're 2 or 3 right now. Let's go to 1. We were 2 last year, 2nd or 3rd ranked this year in most categories. Let's go to 1st.
I just don't ever have a problem with getting better. I mean, if you're number 1, like being 1+ is even better. If you're giving up, 198 yards passing, like giving up 160 yards a game is better. Like, so I think that making a strength, a super strength is like the way that some defenses have made, Super Bowl wins.
Yep. Well, it's going to lead to a good discussion. I mean, we're going to definitely get into that next week, 100%. So one of our shows next week, we'll talk about this more in depth. Jason, final score prediction here to wrap up our show, as will be from the stadium. I got 35-10 because they'll score in meaningless time. So 35-10, covering the 17-point spread. What do you have?
Yeah, I'm going 41-14. I think a late touchdown could happen. But I really want to see a big performance here. And I think that this could be the first game that we see it on all phases where we're getting a defensive or a special teams touchdown, along with an improved Josh Allen making big plays. That's what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to wish it into existence.
I think that's fair. Going to be there. Going to be a good time. Yeah. Going to cover that big spread.
I don't. Kevin harass him.
Yep. If you see Kevin, some of you do shout out, continue to do that. Their defense is just terrible, and they have no offensive line. So take that for what it's worth. Even regardless, with a couple of skill players, that's it. That's all I have. So I think our predictions are fine. Jason, really great show. We're going to get into that trade deadline show next time, recapping this game and a couple other things. I really think next week could be that week that they, especially off a win at 5-1, that's the stage you take the next step. That's, you got the wins you're supposed to, and you're going to try to beat the teams that you compete against, the Clevelands, the Baltimores, and the Phillies, and the Dallases of the world, that you're going to want that next player to help you out, and you're going to get a boost from Croft and Singletary. So why not get a final boost on your defensive side?
Yeah.
So
just the way I think about it is that this team could be playing a lot better, and we're 4-1.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have people coming back. The offense really does have the potential to be a lot better, and we're sitting here at 4-1 with an easy schedule coming up. So
yep, absolutely. So
a lot of reason for optimism.
Tune into that show. But as always, thanks for tuning in. From the Kevin and Jason Show, I'm Kevin. That's Jason.
Thanks, guys.